My daughter-in-law laughed drink in hand and said I looked like her maid in my own backyard. I was wearing the same blouse from the night my husband proposed, and my son just stood there pretending he didn't hear. So I smiled, walked out quietly, and 2 weeks later, I sold the house they lived in and did something they'll never forget. Before we begin, make sure to like and subscribe, and please tell me and others. What's one life lesson everyone should hear before it's too late? Share it in the comments below. Thanks. I had no intention of attending that weekend party, not after the way Vanessa had been acting for the past few months. Snide little remarks, eye rolls when I walked into the room whispering things to Daniel like I was too old to keep up. But Daniel insisted. "It's just a few friends, Mom. Nothing fancy," he said over the phone, his voice tight, like it always is when he's trying not to admit something. So I went. I ironed my nicest blouse, the one Richard gave me on our 30th anniversary. The one he said made me look like class wrapped in sunlight. I put on a little blush, tied my hair back, and told myself it was just a casual gathering. When I arrived, the backyard was already full. String lights catered food women in high heels holding cocktails. The kind of crowd Vanessa likes to orbit. I barely had time to set my purse down before I heard her voice pierce through the chatter. "Oh my God, doesn't Maggie look like Consuela, my old maid from Houston?" She laughed. Not a small laugh, a loud performative one, the kind that's meant to invite others in. And they joined. Laughter rolled across that backyard like wildfire. I stood there holding a glass of red wine someone had just handed me, feeling my cheeks burn. I looked at Daniel. He was across the yard talking to a man in a golf cap. Our eyes met. He looked away. That was worse than the insult, worse than the laughter. My own son, pretending he didn't hear it. I turned, slowly walked toward the guest bathroom, and locked the door behind me. I sat on the closed toilet lid, hands trembling, staring at my reflection in the vanity mirror. My lipstick was smudged. I looked tired, no exhausted, and I thought not for the first time if Richard had been alive, none of this would be happening. Vanessa had started acting like this after he passed. She used to fake sweetness around me, but once he was gone, it was like the mask came off. I always assumed Daniel didn't notice. Or maybe he was too busy to care. But tonight confirmed it. He saw. And he did nothing. I splashed water on my face and waited until the sound of guests moved toward the front of the house before stepping out. I tried to leave without drawing attention. But Elena, our housekeeper, was standing in the hallway folding napkins. She gave me a look. Not pity, understanding. She didn't say anything then, just nodded once. That was the moment something inside me started to shift. Not explode, not break, just shift. Like a gear clicking into a new position. I wasn't angry yet, not fully, but I was aware, painfully aware, that this house no longer felt like mine. I had raised Daniel in these walls, cooked every Christmas dinner in that kitchen, brought Richard home here after his first heart surgery. And now I was being laughed at in my own backyard by a woman who hadn't even been around when Daniel still had baby teeth. On the drive home, I didn't cry. I just drove in silence. Both hands on the wheel, the streetlights flickering through the windshield like static. I pulled into my driveway, turned off the engine, and sat there for a long time with the keys in my lap. I thought about all the times I'd defended Vanessa to my friends. She's just high-strung, I'd say. She means well. But now I wondered, how long had I been lying to myself? And more importantly, how long had Daniel been lying to me? I didn't know then that Elena would come to me with something that would change everything, something tucked away in a drawer. That should have never been opened, but that would come later. Tonight, all I knew was this. My daughter-in-law looked me in the eye in front of a crowd of people and said I looked like her maid. And my son looked away. That's the moment I stopped being afraid of causing a scene. Because the scene had already been caused, and they started it. I just hadn't decided how I'd end it yet. The morning after the party, I was still wearing the same clothes. I hadn't slept. I'd poured myself a cup of black coffee around 6 a.m. and just stood in the kitchen staring at the fridge where Richard's old fishing magnet still held up a faded photo of Daniel at 12 covered in cake. I kept thinking about that moment, Vanessa's voice slicing through the laughter the way Daniel's eyes dropped. I replayed it over and over like a punishment, trying to figure out if I'd missed something, if maybe I'd misunderstood. But I hadn't. Around 8 a.m., Elena called. "Can I stop by?" she asked, which was strange. She never asked. She just showed up and knocked like she always had for the last 15 years. "Of course," I said. And 20 minutes later, she was at my door holding a small tote bag and looking more serious than I'd ever seen her. She didn't even sit. She walked straight to the counter, opened her bag, and laid out a folded manila envelope. "You need to see this," she said quietly. Inside was a stack of printed documents, bank letters, some kind of loan paperwork, and one thing that made my stomach drop to the floor. A second mortgage agreement. My name was on it. My signature. Only it wasn't mine. I found it tucked in the bottom drawer of Daniel's office desk last night, she said. He left it open when they went out back. I don't know why I looked. I just felt something was off. I ran my fingers over the signature. It was close, but not mine. Whoever forged it had practiced. My mouth went dry. "Why would he do this?" I whispered, though I already knew. "Money. Always money." "I think Vanessa pushed him," Elena said. "They've been fighting about renovations. She's been saying things like your mom will be gone soon anyway." She paused, her eyes filling with heat. "Maggie." I wasn't going to say anything, but after last night, after what she said in front of everyone, I nodded, unable to speak. She wasn't just mocking me socially. They were planning financially. And they weren't just waiting for me to die. They were trying to speed it up in legal terms. I felt like I was underwater. "I don't know what to do," I said finally. And Elena stepped closer, her voice low. "You do," she said. "You just don't want to be the kind of woman who does it. But she's already been that kind of woman to you." I blinked fast. It was the first time anyone had put it so plainly. Elena had always been kind, even when things got tense in the house. She never took sides. But now she looked ready to light the whole place on fire for me. I picked up the documents and stared at them like they were written in another language. "Do you think Richard knew?" I asked. "He always said Daniel was smart, but soft." Elena hesitated. "There's more," she said, reaching into her bag again. This time, she pulled out a worn envelope with my husband's handwriting on the front. My name in cursive. "I found this behind one of the books in the den. I think it was meant for you." My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper written with Richard's neat looping penmanship. It wasn't a letter. It was a warning, a journal entry. "I worry Vanessa's ambition is getting into Daniel's bones," he wrote. "She's not cruel. She's careful. And I think he's letting her turn him into something he's not. Maggie, if anything happens to me, promise. Me, you'll watch her closely. Don't let charm make you blind." I clutched it like a lifeline. He had seen it. Long before I ever dared admit it, he had seen what she was. And now I was looking at proof. Legal proof. Emotional proof. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. They had made me feel like a burden in my own house while smiling through it, but not anymore. "You're right," I said to Elena, voice steadier now. "I do know what to do, and I'm going to do it." I spent that entire afternoon pacing my living room with the envelope clutched in one hand and my coffee gone cold in the other. I couldn't get Richard's words out of my head. Don't let charm make you blind. He always had a way of seeing straight through people. He had warned me without saying it to my face, which felt cruel at first, like he didn't trust me enough to just tell me the truth. But I knew my husband. He wasn't hiding it to protect himself. He was protecting me. I'd always hated confrontation, and he knew it. He must have thought if he put it on paper, I'd read it when I was ready. Well, I was ready now. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. So I walked straight to the hall closet, pulled out the metal lockbox where we kept our Willhouse deed, old insurance papers, everything that mattered. I hadn't touched it since his funeral. The key was still on the same ring with my church fob. Inside, everything smelled faintly of old paper and dust. I went straight for the folder labeled Trust and Will and flipped through. There it was in black and white. Richard had left everything to me. Full ownership of the house, control of all accounts. Not a single clause left anything to Daniel or Vanessa while I was alive. I sat down, spread the pages across the coffee table, and just stared. For years, I had believed that maybe Daniel had been helping me managing things, advising me making decisions because he cared. But now I saw it clearly. He hadn't been managing anything. He'd been inching his way into power, one quiet signature at a time, and that forged mortgage. It wasn't just desperate, it was premeditated. My chest tightened as I reached for the last envelope in the box. I had forgotten all about it until now. A small brown package Richard had marked. Private. I opened it slowly, expecting more legal papers, but instead found a small leather-bound journal. His journal. The one he used to scribble in at night when he couldn't sleep, always claiming it helped him sort his brain. I flipped to the final entries, hands trembling. The first few pages were his usual ramblings, stock market updates, bits about his back pain, frustration about Daniel's decision to quit his old job and go into consulting with Vanessa's brother. But then came something that made my stomach churn. Vanessa wants Daniel to accelerate the future he wrote. She doesn't say it directly, but I know what she means. They want control. They're waiting for me to die and for Maggie to fold. I wish I'd handled the trust differently. I thought giving everything to Maggie would protect her, but now I worry it made her a target. I closed the journal and gripped it to my chest like a shield. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't overthinking. It was happening. They were coming for what I built, for the home where I raised my child, for the money Richard spent 4 decades earning, for my peace. I got up and opened my laptop. I typed in the name of the attorney Richard used for the will, Stanley DeMarco. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but his number was still listed. I picked up the phone, dialed, and when his assistant answered, I said calmly, "Tell Mr. DeMarco, this is Margaret Whitmore. I need to schedule a private consultation immediately, no family present." She hesitated for a moment before confirming. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. I agreed. As I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Clarity. Not rage, not grief. Clarity. For the first time since Richard passed, I felt him beside me. Not just in memory, but in action, in the words he wrote, in the files he left, in the decisions he tried to prepare me for. He knew what Vanessa was, and he knew that Daniel, as much as I loved him, was too weak to stop her. But I could. I would. I wouldn't yell or scream or even argue. I would use facts, paper, the law, the same quiet tools they tried to use against me. I had more power than they thought, and they were about to learn exactly how much. I didn't sleep that night either. But this time, it wasn't from confusion or sadness. It was from planning. I laid out every document on the dining table like chess pieces. Richard's will, the house deed, the forged mortgage copy, his journal, and even the envelope Elena had found. I rehearsed what I would say to Daniel. Not because I thought I could change his mind, but because I wanted to see his face when the truth came out. The next morning, I dressed with purpose. Slacks, flats, and the dark navy blouse Richard always said made me look like I ran the school board. I wanted to look like someone in control. I arrived at their house just after noon. Unannounced. Vanessa opened the door in yoga pants and full makeup, clearly annoyed. "Oh," she said, forcing a smile. "You should have called first, Maggie. Daniel's—" I cut her off. "I need to speak with both of you. Now." The tone in my voice must have startled her, because for once, she didn't have a snarky comeback. She called for Daniel, and they both sat across from me at the kitchen, island like two teenagers about to be scolded. I pulled the documents from my bag and laid them down one by one. "This," I said, tapping the forged mortgage form, "has my signature on it. Except I didn't sign it." Daniel's face paled. Vanessa crossed her arms. "You're mistaken," she said too quickly. I looked at Daniel. "Tell me I signed. This Daniel, look me in the eyes and tell me it's mine." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. "How did you get that?" he finally asked, voice low. "Does it matter?" I said. "You committed fraud. You used my name to take out debt on a home that doesn't even belong to you." I slid the deed forward. "I own this house legally fully. Your father made sure of that." Vanessa scoffed. "We've lived here for years. You think you're just going to toss us out over some paperwork?" Her arrogance was unbelievable. "It's not some paperwork," I said, calmer than I felt. "It's proof, and I'm giving you one chance to come clean. Tell me what else you've done. Tell me the truth, and I might consider not pressing charges." Daniel looked like he wanted to disappear. His shoulders slumped, eyes darting around like he was searching for a trap door. "It was just to cover the remodel," he muttered. "We were going to pay it back." I laughed short and sharp. "You forged your mother's name. That's not a loan. That's theft." Vanessa leaned in. "You're being dramatic. It's not like we tried to kill you. You're still alive, aren't you?" "That did it." I stood. "You're right. I'm alive. And I plan to stay that way. Which is why, as of today, I'm removing Daniel as financial power of attorney. I already filed with the lawyer this morning. All access to the joint accounts is frozen. The house is being listed this week. You'll receive formal notice within the next 2 days." Vanessa stood two-faced, flushed. "You can't do that. You're punishing your own son, your family, for one mistake." "No," I said, collecting the papers. "I'm correcting a mistake I made when I let either of you feel entitled to something that was never yours." Daniel tried again. "Mom, please, just can we talk privately?" Vanessa didn't mean it. We just got overwhelmed. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the boy I raised, but a man who let his wife treat his mother like garbage while he stayed silent. I thought of all the times I brought him soup when he was sick. All the nights I sat through his piano recitals, cheering the loudest. And now, here he was begging for privacy after conspiring to steal from me. "I'm done talking privately," I said. "If there's one thing I've learned, it's that secrets are how people like you two operate. I'm done being quiet. I'm done being polite. You have 30 days. After that, you're out." I walked to the door, and Vanessa hissed behind. "Me? You think you're some kind of hero? You're just a bitter old woman." I turned one's hand on the knob, better bitter than blind. I stepped out into the sun, heart pounding, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone's mother or someone's burden. I felt like someone with power, and I was just getting started. 3 days passed before I heard anything from them, and it came not as an apology or a legal inquiry, but as a scream, Vanessa's scream bouncing off the walls of my voicemail like a tantrum in a marble hallway. I played the message twice, first for the words, then just to hear her tone, because nothing revealed a person faster than how they behaved when they lost control. "You can't just kick us out. We've built our lives here. Daniel's kids grew up in this house. You're destroying your own family for what, pride? You're disgusting!" she shrieked. I didn't call back. I saved the recording and emailed it to my attorney instead. That same afternoon, I arrived at the house with a real estate agent, a woman named Marcy, who looked like she didn't take nonsense from anyone and smelled like citrus and ink. As we walked through the rooms, my rooms, I noticed Vanessa had left clothes on the floor in the guest room, shoes scattered in the hallway, a wine glass on the staircase landing, all staged, no doubt, to make the place look unlivable. I ignored it. Marcy took notes, complimented the crown molding Richard had installed in '92, and we discussed the listing price. Vanessa watched us from the top of the stairs like a gargoyle. Her arms were crossed, lips pressed so tightly they looked like one straight line. "You're pathetic," she muttered loud enough for me to hear. I didn't even blink. I signed the paperwork with Marcy right there in the kitchen and scheduled a professional cleaning team for the weekend. That's when Vanessa lost it. She came downstairs stomping like a teenager, grabbed the wine glass off the staircase and threw it at the wall near the fridge. It didn't shatter. It bounced off and rolled under the table like a scene from a cheap soap opera. "This is our house now. You're not the queen here anymore," she shouted. Daniel appeared behind her, looking like he hadn't shaved in 2 days. "Mom, can we just talk?" he said weakly again, with the pleading voice that used to work on me when he was 10. I shook my head. "You forged my name. You tried to steal my home. There's nothing left to talk about." Vanessa stormed past me into the living room and yanked open drawers like she was looking for something to hurl. "I swear to God, I'll tell everyone you're senile. You've lost it. You don't even remember things right anymore." I pulled a paper from my bag and held it up. My new medical evaluation from a private physician conducted 2 days earlier at Stanley DeMarco's request. "Certified mentally competent," I said. Signed and sealed. "I had a feeling you'd try that next." She went silent for a moment, just a second of shocked stillness. Then she lunged forward, finger pointing, face twisted. "This is elder abuse," she screamed. "You're abusing us." I almost laughed. "You mean by holding you accountable?" I turned to Daniel. "Your father trusted you." "He trusted me. And look what you've done with that trust." He opened his mouth, but said nothing. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was damning. It was the sound of a child realizing he'd finally pushed his mother too far. I walked to the front door and opened it. "The listing goes live in 48 hours. A formal notice of eviction will be served Monday. I suggest you start packing." Vanessa muttered something as I walked out. Something about calling her brother, about lawyers, about public humiliation. But I didn't stop to listen. I got in my car, drove around the block, and parked behind the old Walgreens where Richard and I used to sneak sodas after church. I just sat there, windows cracked, listening to the wind. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I felt solid, grounded, like roots had finally formed under my feet again. And I realized in that moment that power doesn't come from yelling louder or playing victim. It comes from truth, from preparation, from knowing exactly what you're owed and refusing to settle for less. Vanessa had made a critical mistake. She thought I was just an old woman with too many memories and not enough backbone. She didn't know I kept every receipt, every will revision, every voicemail. She didn't know I'd been quiet not because I was scared, but because I'd been watching. She had just made herself the enemy of a woman who had nothing left to lose. And that, I knew, was a very dangerous place for her to stand. The morning after Vanessa's meltdown, I woke up before the sun brewed a cup of Earl Grey and sat down with a yellow legal pad to map out everything I still needed to secure before I pulled the final lever. I wasn't just trying to win. I was making sure they couldn't claw their way back after I did. First on the list was the bank. I had already frozen the joint accounts, but now I instructed them to close the ones Daniel had access to entirely and reroute everything into a trust under my name with an independent fiduciary. I didn't trust anyone connected to him. Not anymore. The banker, a young woman named Kelsey, raised her eyebrows at the paperwork I handed over. "Your son forged this?" she asked, stunned. I didn't flinch. "My attorney will be in touch if the bank fails to flag the fraud internally," I said, folding the file with clean precision. "Thank you for your time." Next was the locks. I'd already called a locksmith the day before, but I rescheduled. For Saturday morning, the same day Vanessa was planning some charity brunch at the house. According to the caterer's website, she'd booked the patio, the garden, and a champagne truck for her networking event. She must have thought I wouldn't have the guts to act before it. That was her first mistake. I confirmed with the sheriff's department that the eviction notice would be hand-delivered Monday morning and checked in with Stanley to make sure every signature had been triple verified. I wasn't about to let Vanessa or Daniel poke holes in anything. Once everything was in motion, I returned to the house one final time alone. I walked through every room with a notebook taking stock of what was mine, what was left, and what they'd ruined. The antique table in the foyer had scratches from someone dragging bags across it without lifting. The fireplace mantel was scuffed from God knows what. In the kitchen, the spice rack Richard had built was covered in grease. But oddly, none of that hurt me. It only made the decision clearer. They hadn't respected the home, the history, or the hands that built it. They treated it like a backdrop for their Instagram lives. I stood in the master bedroom doorway and saw my wedding photo still on the dresser, the frame slightly askew. I straightened it. That room had once been full of warmth, Richard's humming while brushing his teeth, the sound of old records playing on Sunday mornings. Now it was cold and sterile, like a hotel room that had been overstayed. I walked back to the hallway closet and retrieved the last of the financial folders, slipped them into my tote, and double-checked the alarm system schedule. I'd already changed the passcode, and I made sure to remove Daniel's and Vanessa's access codes from the system entirely. That evening, I met Elena for dinner at a little Mexican place off 5th Street. She showed up wearing lipstick and a denim jacket I hadn't seen her in before. "You look like you just fired half the world," she joked as we sat down. "I might have," I said, smirking. I told her everything about the lawyer, the bank, the locksmith, the brunch party. She laughed when I told her the locks were being changed during the actual event. "You're cold," she said, raising a margarita to her lips. "No," I said. "I'm finally warm." She leaned in. "You want me there Saturday?" I paused. "I won't stop you." She smiled. "I'll bring my camera." That night back home, I drafted one last document and open letter to Daniel. Not to Vanessa. Not to fight or argue. Just to explain in writing why I was doing what I was doing. I told him how I'd sat through years of tiny humiliations, let his wife chip away at me, hoping he'd notice. I told him that when I heard my own son had forged my name, it broke something permanent. I reminded him of the home we built, the meals we shared, the years I put my heart into raising him, and I ended it simply. "I don't need your permission to protect myself, and you no longer have mine to use my silence as a weapon." I signed it and sealed it. No return address, no PS, no begging for understanding. When I went to sleep that night, I slept harder than I had in months, because for the first time, I knew exactly what was going to happen next. And this time, it would be on my terms. Saturday arrived like a final drumbeat, steady and inevitable, and I was already dressed and out the door by 9 a.m. with a clean blazer, 2 copies of the sale agreement in my bag, and a fresh coat of lipstick that I hadn't worn since Richard's funeral. I arrived at the house before the champagne truck did, and as promised, the locksmith was waiting at the curb, tools in hand, eyes glinting with curiosity. I didn't need to explain much. "Everything that matters is already gone," I told, him gesturing toward the front door. And he nodded, professional and silent, while he began the process of removing Daniel and Vanessa from my home, one bolt at a time. Guests had already started to arrive by the time we were finishing early birds with mimosa energy and charity smiles, none of them knowing that the hostess they came to flatter wouldn't even be able to let them in. I waited in my car until the crowd thickened, watching Vanessa buzz from person to person in her rented floral dress, waving toward photographers like she was about to announce a political campaign. Her eyes caught mine briefly across the lawn, and I smiled. She didn't know yet, but I was going to make sure she did publicly. I stepped out of my car right as the champagne truck driver approached the locked front door, confused and calling for her. Vanessa rushed over heels, stabbing at the lawn, her voice tight and shrill as she realized the key no longer worked. "It's jammed! I swear it's jammed," she said to no one in particular, trying to keep her voice calm as murmurs began to rise. That's when I stepped forward slowly like a school principal walking into a noisy classroom. All eyes turned. "It's not jammed," I said loud enough to cut through the music and conversation. "It's been changed." Vanessa's face froze. "What the hell are you doing here?" she hissed, storming over to me, trying to block my view of the growing audience. "Hosting the final farewell," I said, and from my bag, I pulled out a thick manila envelope. "As of yesterday, this property has been sold. New owners take possession next month. I'd advise everyone here to grab a drink fast. It might be your last one served on this patio." There was a ripple in the crowd. Confusion, laughter, awkward silence. Daniel emerged from the side yard, his face red and exhausted. "Mom, stop," he said quietly. "You don't have to do this here." I turned to him calm and clear. "Actually, I do. Because every time I did it privately, you ignored me. Every time I tried to speak softly, you let her scream louder. So now I'm speaking her language." I handed him the envelope. "Inside, you'll find copies of the sale, the eviction notice, and your forged mortgage agreement. Don't worry, I didn't press charges. Yet." Vanessa lunged toward me, but Elena, bless her, appeared out of nowhere, stepping between us with her phone raised, recording. "Smile." "Vanessa," she said, "wouldn't want your donors missing this." Vanessa stopped short, suddenly aware of just how many phones were out. How many sideways glances were happening behind paper plates and sunglasses. "You vindictive old bitch," she hissed. "You think you've won? Everyone here sees what kind of monster you are." I looked around. Most of the guests were slowly backing away, grabbing their purses, whispering apologies, and slipping toward their cars. The champagne truck driver stood awkwardly next to the gate. "Guess that's my cue," I said, turning toward Elena. "You ready?" "Always," she said, linking arms with me. We walked down the path past the people who once laughed at me in that very backyard, past the house where I raised a boy who forgot who built his world, past the woman who thought she could break me without consequence. As I reached the sidewalk, I turned once more to see Vanessa crumpled in a patio chair, mascara streaking her face. Daniel standing over her, with the envelope in one hand, guilt painted all over him. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just kept walking because I knew this wasn't the end of a party. It was the beginning of my peace. And the best part, I wasn't even done yet. The eviction notice landed on their doorstep Monday morning at 7:42 a.m., hand-delivered by a sheriff's, deputy wearing mirrored sunglasses and a no-nonsense voice that even Vanessa couldn't twist into something victim-like. I wasn't there to see it, but Elena was. She parked 2 houses down with a muffin and a coffee and said the way Vanessa screamed, "You'd think someone stole her kidney." Daniel didn't even argue. He stood at the door in sweatpants took. The envelope nodded like a man who'd finally realized the execution date was real and closed the door quietly behind him. By Thursday, the moving truck arrived. Only one, not the 3 Vanessa bragged about needing for all her designer pieces. And by Saturday, they were gone. No farewell message, no apology, not even a text from Daniel. They moved into a rental across town in a cul-de-sac half the size of the property they once called theirs. And I only knew that because a woman from my old church group happened to live on the same street. She screamed at the movers, the woman told me over the phone, whispering like it was gossip about the mayor. He just sat on the curb and smoked. I said nothing. There wasn't anything to say. It was over. The house was empty for 2 weeks while final inspections were done, and during that time, I walked through it alone one last time, slowly and deliberately, like I was visiting an old friend in the hospital before they slipped away. The air smelled like lemon polish and faint regret. I touched the edges of the fireplace, the worn groove in the stair rail where Daniel used to slide down in his pajamas, the patch on the wall in the hallway where Richard once hung our wedding photo crooked, insisting it looked more romantic that way. I sat in the living room, now stripped of furniture, and let my breath echo. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I was clean. The sale closed 2 days later, a young black couple with a newborn and a rescue dog, Marcus and Shelby Foster. He was an electrician. She worked from home in graphic design. They'd written me a letter with their offer not because they had to, but because they wanted to. "We've dreamed of a house like this," Shelby had written. Not just the yeast space, but the feeling. That sentence alone made me choose them. They didn't want the house for status or show, just for life, for living. I met them at the signing, shook their hands, and left the keys in a small glass bowl by the door. "You'll love the kitchen in the spring," I told Shelby. "It gets morning light all the way to the sink." She smiled and squeezed my hand like we were passing a torch. That night, I drove back to my new place, a small condo near the library, walking distance to the bakery and the community garden. It didn't have a fireplace or a guest wing or crown molding from the 80s, but it had quiet. It had freedom, and it was mine. I unpacked, slowly lit a candle Richard once bought me from a Christmas market, and opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving. For what? I didn't know. Maybe this, maybe now. Elena came by around 8 with takeout and a bottle of soda, and we sat on my new balcony watching the city hum below. "You did it," she said simply. "You didn't just win, you freed yourself." I nodded, staring at the sky. "I didn't know how heavy it was until I let it go," I said. "I kept trying to carry that house, that family, like it was still what it used to be. But it's not, and I'm not." She raised her cup to never letting anyone treat us like the help again. I laughed, then froze, remembering that first moment at the party, the insult that started it all the way. Vanessa's words stung and lingered. "You look like my maid," she'd said. Funny thing was, the woman she tried to compare me to, Elena, turned out to be more family than either of them ever were. And in the end, it wasn't the title that defined me, it was the truth. And I had it all, now documented, notarized, signed, sealed, and delivered. 2 weeks after the Fosters moved in, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in over a decade. I rearranged my bookshelves, not out of necessity, but because I finally had the energy to care about the order of things again. I was halfway through alphabetizing the fiction section when Elena showed up at my door with a wide grin, a bottle of mid-shelf red wine, and a manila folder tucked under her arm. "Got something to show you," she said, stepping in like she owned the place. And honestly, at that point, she kind of did. She placed the wine on the table, opened the folder, and slid a glossy document across the counter toward me. A small business license under her name titled Elena's Home Harmony Cleaning and Organization Services. I blinked, then laughed. "You went legit?" I asked, and she grinned even wider. "Not just legit. I've got 5 regular clients already, 1 part-time girl I'm training, and 2 referrals waiting in my inbox. Turns out people are happy to pay for what I've been doing for scraps for years." I touched the document, felt the weight of it. "You used to say you'd never work for yourself," I said. "You said you didn't know how." She nodded, serious now. "I didn't, until I watched you burn your whole life down and start over with a straight back. You reminded me, I'm not just someone in the background, I'm the reason some of those places run." I poured 2 glasses of wine and handed her one. "You're the reason I didn't fall apart," I said. "You pulled me out of the fog when I didn't even know I was in one." She sipped, then leaned in slightly. "You know, Vanessa tried to call me twice, left a voicemail acting like nothing happened. Said she wanted to make peace and maybe talk about future opportunities." My eyebrows shot up. "You're kidding." Elena shook her head. She must have thought I'd feel bad, that I'd be desperate. She didn't understand that once someone learns their worth, they don't go backward for a seat at a rotted table. I laughed harder than I had in months, full belly and everything. Elena raised her glass again. To self-employment, she said. To boundaries, I added. To dignity, she said. To silence broken, I replied. We clinked, and it wasn't just two women toasting over wine. It was a ceremony, an exorcism, a release. Later that night, after she left, and the dishes were washed, I sat on my balcony and thought about how strange it was that the person who ended up by my side wasn't blood, wasn't someone I raised, but someone I once paid to mop my floors. And yet she was the only one who'd truly seen me, who didn't ask me to shrink or disappear or be grateful just for being tolerated. Elena had built a new business, yes, but more than that, she had built herself a new spine, and watching her made me want more too. Not revenge, not chaos, just a life that felt mine. I pulled out my notebook, the one I used to keep grocery lists in, and began a new page. At the top, I wrote next. Underneath, I listed 3 things. Join the local book club, visit the art museum downtown I always said I'd see, and finally sign up for those watercolor classes Richard once teased me about. He used to say I'd be dangerous if I ever stopped, putting everyone else first. And now maybe I was. Not in a cruel way, but in a firm, quiet, deliberate way. Elena was right. Once you see your own value, there's no going back. And I wasn't going to. I wrote the letter on a Thursday afternoon with the windows open and the sound of someone's wind chimes clinking softly outside like a slow exhale. It wasn't to Daniel, and certainly not to Vanessa. I'd already said everything I needed to say to them with silence and signatures. No, this letter was for my grandchildren, Lila and Thomas. 2 sweet, sharp-eyed kids who didn't ask to be born into anyone's mess, who had hugged me the last time I saw them without hesitation or judgment. I'd waited to write it until the noise had settled, until my own thoughts had stopped spinning, because I didn't want it to come from anger. I wanted it to come from truth. I told them about the house, how it wasn't just walls and rooms, but memories. Chipped tile where their dad once threw a basketball indoors and broke the lamp. The drawer that stuck in the kitchen because I kept extra batteries in it like some sort of superstition. The garden where their grandfather once grew the world's most stubborn tomatoes. I told them it was okay to feel confused or hurt or even mad at me. I told them the story their parents might spin about the house being stolen wouldn't be true, but I didn't ask them to pick sides. I asked them only to remember that love doesn't disappear just because people fail at showing it. I tucked in 2 pictures, one of me and Richard on the porch in '89 and one from Lila's last birthday party. The one where she wore a paper crown and made me pinky promise I'd never forget to bring her extra sprinkles next time. I told them they could come visit me whenever they wanted. No pressure, no loyalty test. Just an open door, cookies in the jar, and a woman who still knew how to play Go Fish. When I sealed the envelope, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tender, peaceful, like I'd finally closed a chapter without slamming it shut. That weekend, I donated the last of Richard's books to the local library and took myself to a community watercolor class. I wasn't good, not yet, but there was something freeing about watching colors bleed into one another, without rules or outlines, just motion and instinct. That night, I made spaghetti for one, lit a candle, and read a mystery novel in bed, with the windows cracked open, and a cup of mint tea on the nightstand. No texts, no drama, no waiting for the other shoe to drop. Just quiet. Just me. Elena texted. Me a photo of her new business cards and a screenshot of a 5-star review a client left her. She saved my house and my sanity, the woman wrote, and I texted back. She does that. I thought of Vanessa sometimes, usually not for long. Usually just in moments where silence hung heavy and memory crept in. I didn't hate her. I pitied her. Because a woman like that who builds her whole life on control and appearances never really feels safe, even when she wins. And Daniel, I wished him peace. I hoped he'd grow a spine someday, maybe even figure out what it means to be a son. Again. But that wasn't my job anymore. My job was done. I'd protected what mattered. I'd reclaimed what was mine. And more importantly, I'd built something new, not out of spite or bitterness, but from the solid ground of knowing who I was, even when others tried to bury it. As I turned off the lights and climbed into bed that night, the room warm and quiet and full of small, ordinary joy, I whispered into the dark, "I'm home." And for the first time in a long, long time, I meant it.